Thanksgiving 2022 blew up right in the middle of dinner. Dad was carving the turkey with that dull old knife he refuses to replace, and everyone was halfway through their mashed potatoes when he cleared his throat and said, "I've got something to tell y'all." I froze with a bite of stuffing halfway to my mouth. "My name's Ryan. I'm 33. I live in Nashville now, but I drove back to our hometown, Jefferson City, Tennessee, for the holiday. Just me, Dad, Mom, my older brother Kyle, and my sister Megan, sitting around the same oak table we've used since I was a kid. Same peeling edges, same dent from where Kyle stabbed it with a fork back in high school. Dad took a breath. "I'm selling the company." Kyle stopped chewing. "You're what?" "Marshall Contracting," Dad said. "I've signed the deal, closing in January." Megan blinked. "You're selling it?" "Yep." Kyle leaned forward, arms on the table. "To who?" Dad ignored the question and kept going. "It's been over 30 years. Time for me and your mama to rest. We got a great offer, $38 million. The silence after that was thick. Kyle's voice turned sharp. "You're just selling it? After all this? What about us?" "You and Megan never wanted it," Dad said calmly. "You both made that clear a long time ago." "I thought we'd inherit it," Megan said. "We grew up in that office." "Being around it isn't the same as working in it," Dad shot back. "Neither of you ever stepped up." Kyle looked pissed. "So you're just cutting us out?" Dad stabbed another slice off the turkey and set it down like it meant nothing. "Inheritance is earned, not assumed. Quick note, before we keep going, tell us where you're watching from today." Megan's mouth opened, but she didn't say anything. Kyle, though, he wasn't done. "You're cashing out and screwing us over." Mom tried to calm him. "Kyle, don't start." "No," he said, shaking his head. "This is messed up." I didn't say a word, just kept eating like none of this was happening. I'd been out of the picture for a while, left right after college, started something else. In their eyes, I was the quiet one who ran from real work. Kyle used to call me Mr. Cubicle, like it was a slur. Nobody was looking at me now. Nobody thought I had anything to say. They were all too focused on Dad. Megan had her arms crossed. Kyle looked like he was ready to throw a chair through the window. But I just sat back and waited, because they had no idea what was coming. Kyle slammed his fork down. "So that's it? You're just going to hand it to some strangers with deep pockets and walk away?" Dad didn't flinch. "They're not strangers. I've met with them 3 times. Sharp guys. Know the business?" Megan shook her head. "This is insane. You're telling me we don't get a say at all?" "I built this from nothing," Dad said. "And none of you ever asked to be part of it. Not seriously." I pushed my plate back. My heart was thudding, but my voice stayed steady. "Can I ask one thing?" All 3 of them turned and looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Even Mom paused mid-sip of her sweet tea. Dad squinted. "You?" "Sure. What's your question?" "Who exactly are you selling it to?" He sat back, wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Ridgeline Equity Partners, out of Nashville. They're buying the whole thing." I nodded slowly. "Right. Well, I am Ridgeline Equity." Dead silence. Kyle barked out a laugh. "Okay, good one." "I'm not joking," I said. "I founded Ridgeline 4 years ago." Megan's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" "I started it with 2 other partners. We built it from scratch, focused on trades-based companies. HVAC, lumber suppliers, roofing contractors, you name it. And for the last year, I've been quietly working the deal to buy Marshall Contracting." Nobody said a word. Dad blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Kyle was still smirking, like I was pulling some kind of prank. "You, Mr. Spreadsheet? Come on." I pulled a folder from my bag, laid it flat on the table, and slid it toward Dad. "Those are the final sale documents, signed, sealed. Take a look at the buyer side." He opened it, started flipping through the pages. Megan leaned over to read. Her face started to change. Dad slowed down, then stopped. "Ryan T. Marshall, managing partner." "That's me," I said. "You bought my company?" he asked. "My firm bought it," I corrected. "I run the firm." He stared at me like I'd turned into a ghost. "Why the hell didn't you tell me?" I shrugged. "Because I knew you wouldn't give it to me. You would have made it about family, not business. I needed to do this the right way." Kyle stood up, pacing behind his chair. "This is some kind of power move, huh? You think this makes you better than us?" I ignored him and kept my eyes on Dad. I studied finance, yeah, but I never stopped caring about what you built. I've spent years learning how to grow businesses like yours, not run them into the ground. And when I saw Marshall was on the market, I made the offer, full price, no favors. Dad looked down at the papers again, slower this time. You've been working on this? 16 months, NDA, third-party brokers, lawyers, all of it legit. He didn't say anything, but I could see it behind his eyes. His world was shifting under him. Megan finally spoke. So, you're the buyer? Yeah, I said. I bought the company you two thought you'd inherit, but never helped build. Kyle looked ready to throw something. Why? Dad asked again, quieter this time. Because I believed in it, I said, and I believed in earning it. The old man leaned back in his chair, still holding the papers. Damn. He didn't sound mad, just surprised, curious even. And for the first time in my life, maybe, he looked at me like he actually saw me. Dad kept staring at my name on the documents like he needed it to sink in twice. He finally looked up and said, "Why didn't you just come to me? We could have worked something out as a family." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. Because I didn't want a deal. I didn't want a discount or some backroom favor. I wanted to earn Marshall contracting, not inherit it. You think I would have handed it over easy? He asked. Not easy, I said, but different. It would have always had an asterisk. This way, you and Mom are set for life. No strings, no guilt. You get the full payout for what you built. Mom touched his arm, quiet. He didn't pull away. Kyle slammed his chair back and stood again. So what? We get nothing? I turned to him. You never wanted it, Kyle. You used to call the job sites Dad's sandbox. You made fun of me for shadowing payroll when I was 16. That doesn't mean I don't deserve a piece. Why? I snapped. Because you showed up for turkey once a year? Megan cut in. So we just get blindsided? You don't even tell us? I didn't owe you a heads up on a business transaction. You weren't involved, she scoffed. That's cold. No, it's clean, I said. You both had years to step in. You didn't. And now that it's worth something, suddenly you're interested? Kyle leaned across the table. You think you're better than us now? I think I worked for this, I said, while you were too busy feeling entitled to even ask how the company ran day to day. Megan sat back, arms crossed. You blindsided the whole family. No, I said. I protected it. You think I did this to spite you? I paid full price so Dad didn't have to carry the weight anymore. He can retire without worrying about who's going to keep it afloat. Dad finally spoke again. You paid market? Every cent, evaluated, audited, financed, negotiated. It's clean. He nodded, slow. And you did all this behind the curtain. I did it right, I said, because I respect what you built. Enough to fight for it instead of waiting around hoping you'd toss me a piece. Kyle sat back down, shaking his head like he couldn't process it. Megan wouldn't even look at me. But Dad? His jaw tightened like he was chewing it over. Then he set the folder down and looked right at me. You did it right, he said. Can't deny that. That was the closest thing to pride I'd ever gotten from him. He didn't say it loud. He didn't say, I'm proud of you, or hug me like some movie ending. He just gave me that small nod, the one I'd chased my whole damn life. And in that moment, it meant more than a parade. Kyle finally broke the silence. His voice was low but steady. So, what happens to us? I looked at him for a second, making sure he was actually asking, not just baiting me. Megan spoke next. Yeah, is there a role, or is this your thing now? I leaned back. There's room, but if either of you wants in, it starts at the bottom. No shortcuts, just like I did. Kyle frowned. You want me starting as what? A laborer? No, I said. There's a spot open in project operations, entry-level coordinator. You'd be supporting site logistics, scheduling, some supplier stuff. He looked like I'd just offered him a job cleaning gutters. That's what I get, he said, after all these years. You weren't there for the years, I shot back. You were busy doing your own thing. You want to be part of this now, great, but you work for it. He didn't respond, just looked down and tapped his fingers on the edge of his plate. Megan was more careful. And me? I've seen your portfolio, I said. You've done good work. Commercial interiors are picking up. If you're interested, we've got 3 builds in Chattanooga that need consulting. She raised her eyebrows. You'd really let me work on that? I'm not handing it to you. I'm giving you a shot. You prove yourself, like I did. She nodded, slow. That's more than I expected, honestly. Dad finally spoke. That's how this company was built. With hands, not names. You want to wear the Marshall name on your hard hat? You better be ready to get dirty. Kyle gave a dry laugh. So, we've got to earn the name now, huh? That's right, Dad said. You think I got any handouts when I poured my first footer? You think anyone handed me a truck and a team and a damn logo? Hell no. I worked. The room went quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of silence from earlier. This one felt different, like something real had landed. I looked at both of them. I'm not trying to cut you out. I'm giving you a chance. But this isn't a family favor. It's a business offer. You're in or you're out. Kyle crossed his arms, still annoyed, but he didn't say no. Megan looked thoughtful. I'll think about it, seriously. I meant what I said, I told them. I believe in building things, not burning bridges. They both sat with that for a minute. For the first time all night, I saw something shift in Kyle's face. Not agreement, but maybe the start of respect. Megan was already picturing the Chattanooga project. I could tell from the way she was tapping her fingers under the table, like she was calculating dimensions in her head. Dad sat back, arms folded, nodding slow. Now, that's how you carry a name forward. By the end of that weekend, we had the start of a plan. A few weeks later, the sale closed without a hitch. All signatures on paper, wires cleared, everything clean. Dad handed over the reins without dragging his feet, though he didn't exactly disappear either. I asked him to stay on as a strategic advisor. Nothing day to day, but enough to keep his head in it and pass down what only he knows. He agreed, reluctantly at first. But I think he liked being needed without being swamped. Kyle took the project coordinator role. I paired him with Tony Gutierrez, one of Dad's old foremen. Tony didn't babysit, but he didn't hold back either. Day one, he handed Kyle a job site clipboard and said, "Follow me or get out of the way." I half expected Kyle to quit within a week. He didn't. He showed up early, kept his mouth shut, and took notes. Real notes, not just faking it. By the third week, he was running subcontractor check-ins on his own. Megan jumped in too. Not full-time, she kept her design business running, but we looped her into 2 commercial builds outside Chattanooga. One was a retail strip, the other a small office complex for a logistics firm. She brought in mock-ups that actually impressed our lead architect. Didn't hurt that the clients liked her style either. Meanwhile, I stayed in the background, where I liked it. My job wasn't on site. It was scaling. I had 2 associates back in Nashville working on due diligence for our next targets. Northern Georgia and Central Kentucky were heating up. Small-town construction outfits with legacy clients and aging owners, just like Dad had been. Marshall Contracting wasn't just a family name anymore. It was Ridgeline's flagship field operation. I made sure every new deck, beam, and foundation poured had Ridgeline's structure behind it, but Marshall's grit out front. That combination hit different. We started getting calls from groups we hadn't even reached out to yet. Word travels fast in this business when people see growth without chaos. Kyle called me one afternoon from a job site outside Morristown. Wind in the background, guys yelling over power saws. "I just dealt with a supplier screw-up," he said. "Handled it. Tony said I did all right." "Good," I told him. "Keep showing up. That's the whole game." Megan sent me a PDF with some revisions for the Chattanooga strip mall. I opened it on my phone during lunch, looked through the updates. They were sharp, clean, efficient, practical, not flashy, just solid work. I forwarded it to the site PM with one line: "Run with these." Megan nailed it. At night, I sat in my home office in Nashville, looking over expansion maps, sipping bad coffee, and thinking about how far we'd come since that turkey dinner. And still, how much was left to build. A few months later, we hosted a small gathering behind the main office. Nothing fancy, folding chairs, barbecue trays, plastic cups full of sweet tea and beer. The crew came out, some clients too. Old-timers, people who'd been with Dad since the first highway bid he ever landed. Right before sunset, Dad stood up and tapped a wrench against the side of his cup. "All right, listen up," he said. "I ain't one for speeches, but I got something to say." Everyone turned. Even Tony stopped stacking chairs. He looked over at me. "Most of y'all know my son, Ryan. Some of you probably still think he's just the kid who left for a desk job in the city." A couple chuckles. One guy said, "We all thought that." Dad nodded. Well, let me set the record straight. Ryan didn't just buy this company, he built the team that made the buy happen. He saw value in what we built and had the guts to go after it. Not because he's my kid, but because he earned it. He waved me up front. Come say something. I didn't love speaking in front of people, but I stood anyway. Appreciate that, I said. To be honest, most of you are right. I was the finance kid. I did leave. I chased spreadsheets in office buildings and wore button-downs with too much starch. A few guys laughed. Even Dad cracked a smile. But when I was 16, I continued, I sat next to Dad at the kitchen table while he tried to figure out how to cover payroll. I watched him sweat over numbers and double-check invoices because if he missed a decimal, guys didn't get paid. That stuck with me. I looked out at the crew, guys with calloused hands, dirt under their nails, same boots they'd worn for years. That's when I realized this business isn't just about concrete and contracts. It's about protecting people, making sure the lights stay on and the work keeps coming. A few heads nodded. Tony gave me a look like, all right, kid. Now I run the business side, I said. But the boots on the ground work, that's still what matters most. When I stepped down, something changed. A few of the guys I used to tag along with back in high school came up and shook my hand. One of them, Ray, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Didn't think you had it in you. Glad you proved me wrong." Kyle stood off to the side, holding a plate of brisket, talking shop with another coordinator, like he'd always belonged there. Megan showed a few clients her concept boards on her iPad, pointing out lighting options for a new medical build outside Knoxville. They weren't just my siblings anymore. They were in it, for real. Not handed roles, not fill-ins. They'd earned their seats the same way I earned mine. 6 months later, we booked out the old banquet hall off Route 11, the same one where Dad signed his biggest highway contract back in the early 90s. Worn carpet, chipped ceiling tiles, but the place held weight, history. Every table had a black and red Ridgeline logo centerpiece, but on the screen behind the podium, it still said Marshall Contracting. The name stayed, always would. It was our first official celebration since the sale. Catered BBQ, open bar, mix of crews, office staff, suppliers, and old-school clients who remembered when we ran out of a trailer. Kyle stood by the bar in a clean polo and work boots, laughing with one of the new foremen. He was running 3 job sites now, had spreadsheets on his phone, color-coded by crew and schedule. He showed up early, stayed late, didn't roll his eyes anymore. He owned it now, and it showed. Megan moved table to table, handing out business cards with her mock-ups printed on the back. She'd landed 2 new commercial interiors contracts through our vendor network, one for a dental chain, one for a tech startup expansion. I hadn't seen her hustle like that, ever. She built more in 6 months than she had in the last 6 years. Dad was by the far wall, leaning on a table, giving advice to 2 young PMs, guys maybe 25, both clearly soaking up every word. He looked relaxed, no clipboard, no radio strapped to his hip, still respected, but finally off the grind. When it was time, I stepped up to the mic. Everyone went quiet. Appreciate y'all being here, I started. This company's been through change, big change, and you stuck with us through it. I looked around the room, faces I'd seen since I was a kid, others new but loyal. This ain't about big money. It ain't about fancy titles. It's about doing the work the right way and passing something forward the right way. That's what we stand on. I raised my glass. To the ones who build. Everyone clapped. Some raised their beers. The music kicked back up and people returned to their tables. As I stepped down, Dad pulled me aside near the back hallway, away from the noise. He didn't say much, just looked me in the eye and said, "You didn't just buy the company, son. You earned the name." I nodded once. That's the only part that ever mattered. Would you have given Kyle and Megan a second chance after how they reacted? Drop your answer in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.